The Hill of Corrin, south of Fermoy, is a prominent landmark for the thousands of motorists who pass it each day on the Cork to Dublin road. Corrin, or Knockona Corrin, is a fusion of the pagan and the Christian. The mound at the summit forms Corrin Tirnoch, which dates back over 3,000 years to the Bronze Age. It has similarities with other burial chambers located on the Nagle Mountains to the west. The wood here in Corrin covers an area of 111 hectares or 274 acres. There is great diversity of tree species throughout this wood, including larch, silver fir, spruce, beech, oak, ash and Spanish chestnut. While the western side of Corrin Woods is cloaked in various shades of green due to the prominence of spruce and pine, the eastern slopes, where we are right now, provide a greater splash of colour, especially in autumn, due to the presence of beech, larch, ash and other broadleaves. There is a variety of pleasant walks throughout this wood, ranging from moderate to easy, and something to suit both young and old alike. This looped walk can be walked in either direction. However, for better views along the trail, anti-clockwise is recommended. It is mainly on quiet forest tracks, with a selection on the northern side through mature beech woodland. Views are spectacular across the Golden Vale to the south and over the town of Fermoy. Views from Corrin are magnificent across the Blackwater Valley, north to the Galtee Mountains, west to the Nagle Mountains, and south to Watergrass Hill, and east to the Knockmill Down Mountains. Fauna to be seen include the rabbit, the hare, the woodrush, the fox, the red squirrel and the stoat. Fallow deer can also be seen here, while a great variety of birds make their home in these woods. The third monument here on Corrin is the Hilltop Fort, in the middle of which stand the cairn and the modern stone cross. There are about 50 known hilltop forts in Ireland, and so far only 8 of these forts have been excavated, and Corrin Fort is not one of these. There is still much to be discovered about these forts. However, it is generally accepted that they date from the early Iron Age, which in Ireland came in perhaps 400 years or so before Christ. In olden times, the hilltops always stood for safety and ease of defence, especially as the valleys were probably densely forested. These forts were erected as settlements or occupational sites. Irish hilltop forts vary in size from 1 acre to 37 acres. Some of them have only one rampart or embankment enclosing them, others have more than one, and sometimes there are deep fosses or ditches inside the ramparts. The outer rampart on Corrin ran horizontally around the summit between the 600-foot contour and the 700 one, nearer to the latter, while just over half a mile to the west-southwest of it there is an ordinary ring fort, which is almost bisected by the 600-foot contour. When the late Mr. P.J. O'Shea, founder and organising secretary of the Fermoy Field Club, and the present writer tried to trace this hilltop fort in Corrin in 1949, the remains of 3 great embankments were clearly visible. Not only that, but they were quite discernible on the skyline from several points on the Dunathahan Road and Cork Roads near the town. It was possible to trace the complete circle from the outer embankment, while the foss separating it from the middle embankment was quite distinct, through more than half a circle, from a southwesterly point, through west and north, around to northeast. A wall constructed of stone was built in more recent times along this outer rampart on the eastern side just below the cross for several hundred yards. At 2 points on the outer face of the rampart, one on the southeast side and the other on the southwest, patches of what looked like a rough wall of earth and stones were exposed, and immediately below them were screeds of loose stones, as if there had been a partial collapse of the rampart at these points. On the west side, there was a wide opening in the outer embankment, one end of which curled inward, while the other end overlapped it on the outside, giving the appearance of a gateway or an entrance. The second embankment was quite distinct for almost 2/3 of a circle on the south, west and north sides, and on a small weathered patch on the west side, loose dry stone walling was visible. The third or inmost embankment was quite distinguishable clearly on the northwest side for several hundred yards. On the remainder of the west and the north side, it appeared as a slight rise in the ground surface. With the passage of time, the embankments of course became eroded, and the ditches or fosses were filled up to some extent, with the material being washed off them. Unfortunately, since the planting of Corrin wood by the Forestry Service, irreparable damage has been done to this hilltop fort, except for 1 or 2 paths of fire breaks and a crescent of the northeast, east and southeast sections of the fort. Trees were planted all over the embankments and the space within them. Note that it was in this very area where the embankments and fosses were clearly traceable that the tree planting was done. The spreading of tree roots in all directions will complete the destruction. Even the cairn may suffer further damage, as trees are growing right up to its northern and western edges. In view of the great work being done by the Forestry Service, it seems a pity that there was not some liaison between it and the archaeological institutions in this country, so that prehistoric and historic relics would not have been endangered, and so what remained of this hilltop fort on Corrin would have been preserved and the cairn made safe from possible further damage in the future. Ballyoran Corrin, the ancient medieval church of Kilkennon. Cannon's church once stood on a 2-acre raised section of land on the lower slopes of Corrin Hill on its north side. This church, the site which is now rather difficult to identify, was pre-Norman and was the first church in our area before the town of Fermoy existed. It therefore represented the earliest Christian heritage of this immediate area and controlled an acreage of land in excess of 150 acres, down to and including the current town of Fermoy. These lands were acquired by the Bishop of Clyne when he was appointed as a result of the organising of the Irish Church into a diocesan system after the Synod of Rathbrazel in 1111. Some of these lands were given by the bishop to the Cistercians, who founded an abbey at Fermoy in 1170. This little overgrown roadway is known as the Priest's Walk. The area was once used by priests from neighbouring parishes who used to come out here and traverse this little roadway to say their office. It is an official right-of-way, though in the past 4 to 5 years has become severely overgrown. This stone wall running from the summit down the eastern slopes of Corrin Woods separates the parishes of Fermoy to the left and the parish of Castlelyons to the right. During the filming of this documentary, over the seasons of summer, autumn and now winter, I encountered quite a variation of weather conditions. Some, and indeed most, were ideal for filming outdoors, but as you'll now see, the weather that I encountered on this particular day when I was filming in Corrin Woods was far from ideal. Adjoining Corrin Woods is Fermoy Golf Club. Established in 1892, this wooded course represents a challenging test for both the expert and the novice golfer. The newly refurbished clubhouse and restaurant overlook the rolling course and countryside. Corrin Hill is a focal point for the area, with its commanding stone cross at its summit. Situated on the sunny south-facing slopes of Corrin Hill, and set in a glorious profusion of natural heather and gorse, it offers a varied and interesting challenge to the experienced and occasional golfers alike. Fermoy Golf Course commands breathtaking views of the Blackwater Valley. Ballyoran Bog is a small fen bog which formed in a narrow pass in the foothills of the Nagle Mountains between Corrin and the summit at Ballyoran. During the construction of the Dublin to Cork motorway, 8 archaeological projects were engaged to monitor works within previously untested and unresolved locations along the route for the new N8 motorway. During the excavation and construction of the motorway through Ballyoran Bog, the remains of a giant Irish deer and a possible brushwood trackway were excavated. The skeletal remains of the giant Irish deer are a rare occurrence on archaeological sites, But one of the most interesting aspects of the excavation was the discovery that later inhabitants of the area were aware that deer remains were present in the bog, as tool marks on antler fragments demonstrate. The earliest known human occupation of Ireland dates to the Mesolithic period, 7000 to 4000 BC. There is no known evidence of Mesolithic activity within the area affected by the construction of the motorway through the bog. However, the Blackwater Valley has yielded some confirmation of Mesolithic activity along its banks in the form of flint scatters at Castleblah and Kilcummer Lower. The Avondhu is where the very first Irish set out on a long journey as early Stone Age hunter-gatherers to become our first farmers. It is where the spiritual and mystical Druids embraced Christianity and went on to contribute to European enlightenment in the Dark Ages. It is where we absorbed waves of invasions, taking the best from each to emerge as a people distinct in Europe. It is where armies of thousands gathered to take on the might of Napoleon at Waterloo, and later the Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy in the Great War. The Avondhu, the cradle of Ireland, is where Ireland started, where the very first Irish set out on that long journey more than 10,000 years ago. It is the motherland for millions around the globe. The richness of the valleys has made this area one of the first areas in Ireland to be settled. During the Ice Age, the Avondhu was not glaciated, and the very first settlers in Ireland are likely to have crossed from the Iberian Peninsula on a land bridge along the coast over 10,000 years ago. On arriving, it is very likely that they would have made their way up the Blackwater River and spread out up its tributaries. The arrival of Christianity in the 7th century is seen throughout this area. Again, the early monks travelled up the same waterways and valleys as the earliest settlers. After the arrival of Christianity and the introduction of education, farming and building technology, the area thrived to become prize lands to be gifted by a succession of monarchs to warriors down through the ages. Waves of Norman invasions, 2 plantations of Munster, and the Cromwellian conquest have all left their mark on this landscape. There is a story behind every castle, church, ruin, grand house, hilltop fort, and Killeen waiting to be told. It's part of our heritage, and if you can trace your roots back to the Avondhu, the cradle of Ireland, it's also part of yours.